4 months ago, I bought Apple's Pro Display XDR for the office. At the beginning of this year, as I was renovating my home studio and setting up the desk, something just felt missing. I kept on thinking about the 6K resolution at the office, and it was really hard to go back to anything else. So naturally, I shopped around for another. I was looking for something similar, something premium, preferably without that $6,000 price tag. But the crazy part is, in the 6 years since the XDR display is launched, only one other company has even attempted to make a full aluminum 6K display. This one. Let's talk about it. This is a Kuycon G32P. And putting it side by side with the XDR, the resemblance is undeniable. The resolution is retina level, there's no visible bezels, and the power supply is hidden internally. And of course, the one cable setup to your Mac. And I totally get it if somebody would call it a copycat. Honestly, I wouldn't really blame them. I've seen many reviews on this monitor on the internet. They mainly focus on the looks and experience using it. But I want to do more than that. Because for a relatively unknown brand, you kind of need to get a little bit more technical to really understand whether it's up to the Apple standard. So today, I want to put this 32-inch 6K monitor through a full test. A deep performance breakdown by professional tools, and a side-by-side comparison with my own Pro Display XDR, all to answer one question. Can this thing really be a solid alternative to a $6,000 Apple monitor at a fraction of the price? Okay, let's start with the build quality. This thing is a solid block of aluminum. If you don't hit the gym often, I'll be careful with this. There are 3 smaller boxes down here. We got the power cable, a USB-C cable, and some USB adapters. This USB-C cable is actually a high-quality one, capable of Thunderbolt 5 data transmission, so make sure you use the one that came in the box. In the next box, there's a remote control. We also have the DisplayPort cable and HDMI cable. In the center box, there's this VESA adapter bracket. I gotta say, the build quality of the VESA mount is actually quite nice. When I bought the Apple XDR, I don't think it came with any mounting accessories. I actually have to buy it separately if I remember correctly. I also got the Pro stand from Kuycon, which cost me another extra $100. Compared to Apple's version, the Pro stand, which cost a whopping $1,000. This is also a plus for Kuycon. You can tell it's genuinely a solid stand. The surface finish is really nice. It's anodized aluminum with sandblasting texture. Put this on your monitor and I bet 99% of people wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But the difference do exist in fine details. The Kuycon stand is actually not a single piece of aluminum like Apple's. You do have to assemble 2 parts together and slot this circle in the back of the display and use one single screw to lock everything in place. It can support height adjustment, tilt, and 90-degree rotation in portrait mode. Apple's Pro stand, despite the similar look, is a lot more elegant. It has 2 articulation points, here and here, with internal mechanism on both joints. The Kuycon stand, on the other hand, doesn't have the rotational joint, so when you try to flip it 90 degrees, it was actually the mounting circle doing all the work. It's functional, but it's definitely not the same buttery balance feel on the XDR. And there's something else. And this is not really a stand feature. Apple's XDR actually have an internal gyroscope. If you rotate it 90 degrees, just like your iPhone, the display orientation will adjust automatically. I've never seen any other monitor do that. With the Kuycon, it's more traditional. You have to manually change the rotation setting in your OS. It's a small thing, but I guess a $1,000 stand is expensive for a reason. Okay, let me peel off the screen protector. I think at a glance, this could absolutely pass for an XDR on your desk. This lattice pattern functions as a passive heat sink. 6K monitor can get hotter than average monitors, especially when the panel pushes serious brightness like the XDR does. So this expanded surface area let the monitor dissipate heat without internal fans. Apple's lattice pattern has this perfectly spherical machine-milled holes. The Kuycon's lattice pattern looks different, making the whole lattice pattern a bit shallower than Apple's implementation. I think this is by design because peak brightness on Kuycon is also lower. The XDR has a peak brightness of 1600 nits and Kuycon only sustains 500 nits, which is more in line with a Studio Display. I actually tested it. It really doesn't get hot at all. The lattice pattern could very well be mostly for looks. They also sell a flat back version for a bit cheaper. So if you really want to save a few bucks, I think it's perfectly fine just to get the normal one. One last thing when it comes to aesthetic, the Apple XDR is a truly seamless aluminum chassis. I cannot find a single seam on the entire body. The Kuycon has a visible line on the back panel around the edges. So it's not perfect, but honestly, I think I'm nitpicking a little here. I don't think anybody's gonna argue that the build quality of this beats almost all third-party competitors on the market. Now, before we continue, I'd just like to say one more thing. This video is not sponsored by Kuycon. I bought this directly from their official website. They don't technically sell on Amazon or any other third-party platform. The only official website directly managed by Kuycon right now are these two. If you're buying it from somewhere else, you're likely buying from a third-party distributor, which could mean better or worse services. Depends on who that distributor is. This is not a well-established brand like Apple, so be careful where you get it from. I'll put the link of their official website in the description below. Alright, let's fire this thing up. I've got my MacBook Pro connected over there with the included Thunderbolt cable. There's a single button on the bottom right corner to turn the monitor on. Now, if you never used a 6K display before, this moment is going to blow you away. The image quality is incredibly sharp. Even up close, I really cannot make out individual pixels even if I tried. The core panel is made by LG with pixel density, or PPI, of 223. The model number, this is important, LM315STA-SSA1. Why is that significant, you may ask? Well, because if you trace the model number back to the monitor that uses it, you get this too. The Dell Ultra-Sharp 32-inch 6K, priced at $2,300. And the LG Ultrafine Evo 6K, currently selling at $1,996 on Amazon. So what the Kuycon has essentially done here is take the same LG 6K panel, threw out a cheap plastic shell, wrapped it in an Apple-inspired aluminum body, and priced it under $1,700. The panel size is 31.5 inches with native resolution of 6144 by 3456. Slightly higher than the Apple XDR, which runs at 6016 by 3384 at PPI of 218. The difference is small, but these three monitors are technically the sharper displays. Except for the three monitors using the LG 6K panel, there are also Asus ProArt PA32QCV and Acer's ProCreator PE320QXT. Both are 32-inch monitor in the 6K class. I put these two in a separate category because both Asus and Acer use a different panel from AUO, a Taiwanese company. You can do your own research on the difference between this panel and the LG ones. It's a much longer conversation. However, as you can imagine, what pushes me to choose a Kuycon at the end of the day is because of the aluminum chassis. I'll summarize all my research in this nice table just for your reference. Of course, resolution isn't everything. The biggest disadvantage of this panel is that this is a nano IPS black panel. The Apple XDR is a mini LED with 576 local dimming zones, capable of hitting 1 million to 1 contrast ratio versus Kuycon's 2000 to 1. Theoretically speaking, this is going to give the XDR a huge advantage when it comes to professional HDR workflow when you absolutely need the best contrast ratio for your content. The G32P is listed as HDR10 compatible, and technically it can accept and process an HDR signal. But it's important to point out there's a difference between accepting an HDR signal and actually displaying HDR properly. Real HDR requires either local dimming zones, like those in the mini LED, or self-emitting pixels, like in the OLED. Without one of those, the monitor just boosts the entire backlit across the whole screen to hit the brightness target, which is going to wash out some part of the darker part of the image. But then again, you have to realize those two technology on a 32-inch monitor is going to be super expensive. Even in 2026, OLED and mini LED are not cheap at all. Being in the $1,000 to $2,000 price range, the Kuycon is basically among the cheapest 6K panel you can find. So I guess it really depends on your own use cases. If you're an average person who just looks for a 6K monitor without really caring too much about HDR, I think the Kuycon is a great buy. Now, different from the other Kuycon monitor I tried, there's no HDR toggle for this G32P. Because the HDR mode is always enabled by default, any HDR content is going to automatically look better. Now, if you are considering this monitor, color accuracy is got to be one of your biggest concerns. So inside the package, there's also this little card, which contains all the technical documents and manuals of the display. I was actually fairly surprised to see this. They actually went extra miles to disclose all the testing data. I'm looking at you, Apple, because for years, Apple didn't disclose their Pro Display XDR's color space coverage until it kind of started to draw a lot of controversies. Kuycon, on the other hand, has obviously learned a lot from that lessons. In the quality control report card, they clearly stated 99% of color space coverage on both DCI P3 and sRGB. Let's see if that holds true in our own test. To truly test out the color accuracy, you need an industry-level color analyzer. For example, this Konica Mini Letta CA410, which cost a whopping $18,000. Kuycon uses this model in their lab test, but obviously I can't shell out that kind of money for a video, so I settled for the next best thing. I do have this Color Bright Display Plus HL, which is a top-of-the-line model that can test up to 10,000 nit. It should be enough to at least confirm their color accuracy report. I'm gonna run it at the full capacity at 461 tested color and compare the result with Apple's own native color sync utility app. We should be able to see clearly whether their quality control result is accurate. The testing process is a little bit boring, so I'm gonna speed it up. Now, without getting too technical, this is the final result. Now, on the left, we have the Kuycon's claim number. Under the DCI P3 color space, the delta E is only 0.63. Really impressive and 99% coverage. I also checked with 461 sample color with a Color Bright flagship colorimeter, and it was almost dead on, delta E of 0.6. And if it maps against the DCI P3, it's almost a perfect coverage if you look at the graph. Same thing for the sRGB, but that's a much lower standard. You can do this on your own Mac if you own a device like this. Profile your monitor and search for the Color Sync utility app on your Mac. And from there, you can basically compare any monitor's color performance. The Kuycon also have a great contrast ratio at 1200 to 1 at 50% of the brightness, which is more than enough for average viewing experience. In my own testing, it can push up to 1900 to 1 under HDR content, which is more or less in line with advertised 2000 to 1. So I'm really quite impressed with its performance, to be honest. I don't see any other reviewer on the internet highlighting that attribute. Everyone was so focused on the aesthetics. I think they went above and beyond to make this budget-friendly, color-accurate 6K resolution monitor. Kudos Kuycon. Good job. But the biggest criticism about this brand was always the screen unevenness. You can clearly see from this report the edge is actually got brighter in some area. If you compare the actual brightness reading, it is only about 2 to 8% brighter. For that kind of difference, you're probably not going to notice with your own eye. A screen uniformity test will also show that color accuracy slightly shift across the whole panel. But again, the difference is really just a few percentage. There probably will be some people who's able to recognize this, but for most people, they probably can't. So this is really a big surprise for me, and I think if you're a designer or anyone who works with graphics or color, you're going to be really happy about this. The glass. The Kuycon uses a fully laminated glossy AR glass bonded directly to the IPS panel, the only third-party 6K monitor on the market that does this. This is often an overlooked aspect of the monitor, but to me this is actually the reason why it looks so closely to the Apple display. Now here's why this matters. Most monitors use matte anti-glare coating because they're designed for office environment with harsh overhead lighting. I mean, that's a practical design choice, but it does come at a cost. Matte coating scatters light and makes image look slightly hazier. But if you can control the light source in your room, which most of us can, a glossy screen like the one on your MacBook Pro or your iPhone will often serve you better. According to Kuycon, the G32P use full lamination, the same technique Apple used on iMac and Studio Display. The glass is bonded directly to the LCD screen with no air gap, which eliminated internal reflection and boosts perceived contrast. Combined with the AR coating, reflection are managed without killing the glossy clarity. Let me flip it over and compare the I/O with XDR. On the rear I/O panel, you have this extrusion with all the ports you will need. You get two full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 port at 48 GB per second, one DisplayPort 2.1 at 80 GB per second. The USB-C port are not clearly marked, but this one is an upstream port with Thunderbolt 5 capability, also at 80 GB per second, with 100 watt power delivery. When you hook up your computer, you want to use this port right here. One USB-C cable from your MacBook to the monitor handles video, data, and charging all at once. Apple XDR, on the other hand, is a USB-C only device. It comes with a Thunderbolt 3 cable, but the other ports are not that useful. If you have any other device other than your MacBook, you'll probably need to get a desktop dock like this, which costs another $150. There are two USB-C downstream ports, a 3.5mm audio jack, which I truly appreciate. Both monitors have power supplies that are fully internal. The connectors are both 3-prong AC cable with no external break. The Kuycon also gives you this small remote for on-screen display. You will need this if you want to calibrate it for 100% color accuracy. The menu itself is pretty straightforward. You can adjust brightness, contrast, color setting, etc., etc. Nothing really too fancy. For most people, you probably won't need to touch this at all. Alright, if you've been wondering what does the picture quality actually look like, here is a moment of truth. I've set up both displays right here. The Apple Pro Display XDR on one side and the Kuycon G32P on the other. I'm gonna show you a series of footage I captured myself without telling you which one is which. See if you can tell the difference. Now the Kuycon is the one that's on the left. Did you get that right? Now, honestly, those two monitors weren't meant to be compared head-to-head because they're fundamentally in different leagues, different panel technology, different price tier, but for most people, they do kind of look the same from across a room. And that's kind of the whole point. When I ran through this comparison, the difference to human eye are really subtle. Bright, well-lit content, they are nearly indistinguishable. It was only under professional testing tools where the difference started to show. Alright, some final words. Is the Kuycon G22P an XDR killer? Absolutely not. But is it a premium product without a premium price tag? I will give it a sounding yes. At the end of the day, these two monitors really aren't in the same competition. The XDR is a professional reference monitor with a hefty price tag, arguably the most premium build quality in the industry. To me, it's still the gold standard after 6 years. However, what the Kuycon G22P represents is also remarkable for different reasons. It takes the same LG 6K panel, wraps it in a full aluminum chassis that looks nearly identical to the XDR as a fully laminated AR glass. All this under $2,000. That in itself is pretty amazing. If you're an Apple user who's been eyeing the XDR but can't justify $6,000, or if you're someone value a premium minimalist setup at a reasonable price, the Kuycon G32P is genuinely a great option. Alright, that's it for this video. Leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel. I just moved into this new studio. I'm still testing out different monitor setup. If that kind of thing interests you, there will be more content like this coming. Thanks for watching, have a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!